Matthew. Hi, everybody. Again, many of you who have been here before before this afternoon, thank you for coming back. Some of you are new to this afternoon, so thank you for coming to the Los Angeles 7th Annual Street Week in LA. I'm so delighted. You know, each time I talk before a speaker, I don't want to say the same thing, so I want to say something a little different. And one of the things that I'm so excited about with Street Week is we've had a street photography program now for 11 years, and it grew from like 5 people in one class to now what it was before the pandemic, quite a big street program. And we're coming back after having taken a year off. But it's a group of just incredibly talented, dedicated people to documenting the city in which we live in. Now, the street photography, the first group, they're called On the Streets in LA, and they learn about everything, the ethics and the laws and the fact that you aren't ever supposed to set anything up or ask anybody to do anything. It's the same ethics as photojournalism and documentary. They learn all that. They learn what's a good photograph on the street. And then by the time they get to the street collective group, they're so good, they're not called students anymore because they are colleagues. They are very talented street shooters. And we have many of them actually right now. We'll start that program again in a couple of months, which we're excited about. The first place winner of our singles category is Thule Dosius in the exhibit on Thursday. And she's in this group and has been for many years. And she's so talented. That's what I wanted to say about the street photography group for right now. I'll tell you more about other things as we go. And now I would just like to introduce Melissa. I'm so excited about learning about her in the last couple of years. And I should have known before then, but I guess I can't keep up on everybody because there's, good photographers all around the world. But once I found out her work and I saw it all and I saw her and I saw what she'd done, and I was like so excited I could hardly wait to invite her to be a part. And when she said yes, I was so pleased. So thank you, Melissa, for being here. I'm just so delighted to have you. She was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which would make our director of operations, Brandon Gannon, very happy because he's also a Minneapolis, Minnesota guy. She went to Georgetown University and the University of St. Thomas, graduating with a degree in journalism. She's now a photographer, as we know, based in New York City. Her work has been featured in books and exhibits, and she's one of the Up photographers, which we've talked about all morning, an amazing collective, which anybody who's in it is somebody in street photography, so it's really something. And she's just her most recent, well, maybe, I don't know if it's your only, Melissa, you can tell us this later, or your first, your monograph. It's so exciting. So it just came out in October of 2020. So she can tell us about that as well. So she can tell us more about herself. I can't wait to know more about you myself when we can get together one-on-one. But for now, let's have you tell us more about yourself. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Julia, for such a lovely and enthusiastic welcome. It's a pleasure to be here. As we discussed a little before we went live, I'm very sorry that I can't be there in person. I think we're all missing that very much, and we know the pleasures and terrors of Zoom. So I appreciate your all being here. It has its advantages, and I hope we can take advantage of them. Also, please, I'm going to be showing work from my book and work in other book forms, things that I'm working on now. But I'm really eager to have questions come in as I'm going through the work. I think I would like to have a discussion, and any questions you have about how I took the picture, why I took the picture, or what interests you or what doesn't, or how the book came about. I'm happy to take questions as we go. So if I hear you pipe in, I will pause my monologue and make it more of a conversation. So please don't hesitate to ask. I started photography quite late in life. I had children young. My father was an avid amateur photographer. I grew up with a camera in my face, and I was a little put off by it as a child. I took family pictures as my kids were growing up, but it wasn't until my oldest, my son, was in high school and took a photography class and begged us to put a darkroom in the basement, that my interest was piqued. And, you know, lo and behold, not much to my surprise, his interest had waned by the time the darkroom was done. So I went off and took a course at a local college and worked in the darkroom for a few years, with black and white film. I developed my own film. I started working in medium format. None of that work I will probably ever show. It's unremarkable and to me rather uninteresting now. But it was the fertile ground for an interest in something that has sustained me, with great joy and delight and energy, in the years since. It was a photography workshop with Joel Meyerowitz out in Palm Springs in, oh, it must have been 2012 or thereabouts. That it wasn't until then, my interest in street photography was piqued. I'm a natural introvert. I was very shy. I was living in the suburbs. But Joel's contention that street photography is really sits at the very essence of what a camera and what photography can do, unique to other artistic mediums, that it can freeze that 500th of a second. And any of you who've heard Joel speak knows how eloquent and delightful and passionate he is about the medium and about street photography as well. And it was a light switch going on. And not long afterwards, my husband and I bought an apartment in the city, because two of our older children were living there. And it was just a way to be closer to my family. So that gave me the place, and Joel gave me the spark of passion, and off I went. And it took me a few years, to have any courage. I was slow to start in the streets. I was afraid to get close to people, afraid that I would offend them. But after, say, I would say 2014, 15, when I started to make a few photographs that I thought that worked, that pulled things together for me, and I was off to the races. And so I'm going to start out showing the work that really came from that time in New York City, and my increasing courage and delight in the people of New York and the media, the practice of street photography. And it was published in a book by Aperture this past fall. And the name of the book is Perfect Strangers. So please chime in with questions as we go along. And I'm going to try to share my screen. So Aperture approached me with an interest to publish this work. I think they're very interested. They were interested that I was a woman, and kind of pounding the pavement of a lot of men who had gone before me. So my editor and I, my wonderful editor, Denise Wolf, and I started with a pile of 500 pictures and winnowed them down and went through them and made the A pile and the B pile and the C pile, and gradually started just to lay out, really, nothing laser prints on big tables in Aperture's gallery, and just started to sift through the work. And because I didn't have a title, I didn't have a specific theme when we began. And slowly, as we met week after week for about 6 weeks, shuffling pictures around and finding pairings, the work and the story and the feeling of the book started to emerge from this big pile of photographs. And it's something that, I don't go out with a specific, I never have a plan in mind, but the work grew from all this sifting through the photos, and the story that started to merge. And the story that I wanted to tell was, at the outset, was that it was a woman doing this. It's not just about my femininity, but it is about a woman's approach to people in the street. And I think that we eliminated a few pictures that might be perceived as not so nice, or a little, I don't know what the word is, gritty. I had no homeless. We wanted to tell a story. Really, what emerged was the story of the people of New York, and my delight in them. So I very much wanted to start with this character. She's strong. She's seen it all. She's dressed for business. She never noticed me, and she was posing like she might have. But I thought she was a strong, older woman character to set us off on the streets of New York City. I love her. I hope someday she sees the picture in the book. And I'm starting here with just kind of my opening sequence. And we felt it was important to kind of start out with the first 5 or 6 pictures to introduce what I'm interested in, what the story I'm going to tell is about. So it's the older woman, it's the child running, energetically through this massive architecture in New York City. So we've set a stage in the early pictures. This scene down in Chinatown, it looks choreographed, but it's unposed and unplanned. Again, with a strong woman at its, holding that door from the man. It's a little bit of turning the tale, and we liked starting out the book that way, without ever, not banging anyone over the head with it. Of course, there's someone on a cell phone, there's a family emerging. All these themes are things that you'll start to see through the book. And I'm not going to show the whole book. I just want to kind of give you the feeling of how we built the sequence and the story from such a big pile of pictures.
Melissa, we have a question.
Yes.
Eleanor would like to know, did any of the images that were in pile B and C make it into the book?
Yes, yes. Some went in, some went out. The A and B piles started to blur a little bit. But as we built the sequence, we started to realize at times there was need for a quieter moment, or when you're working with all color photographs, there's the complication of colors. Sometimes you need to keep in mind from one page so you don't want to be jarring in your color. So yeah, the B pile didn't do too badly. All in, I would say maybe of 90 pictures in the book, maybe 10 or 12 came from what we didn't think initially were the A images. Thank you. That's a great question. Sequencing is a very inexact art, and I'm sure I'll look at this book 5 years from now and think that I might have done things differently, but it's printed and bound, so there's no going back now. This scene is 8th Avenue at 42nd Street in New York, and as anyone who's worked on the street and on a very busy street knows, one of the hopes that you have, which is so often dashed, is getting chaos to look like it has some sense of order. And again, I've anchored this corner with this beautiful woman who's kind of deep within herself. That's another thing I find I'm attracted to people in a crowd who feel like they're alone in this crowd. She's very thoughtful and lovely, and the floral dress, every time I see flowers on clothing or people carrying flowers, I think of Joel's wonderful book, Wildflowers, which has just been re-released, and I highly recommend. So a lot of street photographers always have that little memory of his wonderful book that he compiled of just floral photographs.
Melissa,
again, yes.
Patty would like to ask, did you do any additional shooting for this project while you were going through the sequencing process?
I was still shooting, but we kind of cut it off at that initial pile we started to work with. I think maybe this woman in the floral dress was a latecomer. I might have brought that in after I had sent my editor the 500 photos that we started with. She might have been a latecomer, but otherwise it was all work from 2019. And I just didn't want to keep complicating things by throwing in new work, because we had a lot to work with. And it's, at some point you've got to draw a line or you'd never finish. So yeah. So this is a few blocks west or east on 42nd Street. This is a corner that is no longer, it is nothing like it used to be before the pandemic. And I think it's going to be a long time, because it's a crossing from Grand Central and Times Square and Penn Station, and people come through this corner from all over New York City. And it was just on a Friday was chaos, just a beautiful chaos. And again, I think this picture tames the chaos a little bit and tells a couple stories in one photo. Someone heading west, and then a man tired from his walk down Fifth Avenue, and a friend who's seen him, and the wind is blowing and people are rushing to their train, and it kept, and the feeling of the architecture on that corner, and the light, because the public library is behind me, there's still good light in the afternoon. So it's a very New York place that I hope will return. And I'm interested in children. This is just this tiny little girl who doesn't look big enough to walk. And of course, the family kind of surrounding her, and it's a hallowed corner in the world of street photography because of that leg granite wall of the Tiffany store. And of course, street photographs can lie. It looks like she's been abandoned, but of course her parents are right there. I just didn't put them in the frame. And that's how we can tell a story, our story of the street. It's not all there. You want to leave things a little open to interpretation. I'm also very attracted to twins and twinning and people who dress alike or look alike. Obviously, the little girls in tutus had come from some children's event, maybe in Times Square, and the redheads the day before St. Patrick's Day. I suspect they're from Ireland, but they're magnificent, and I'm attracted to these pairings. So we paired a pairing. This elderly gentleman it's a street fair very close to my apartment down near Union Square. Again, he's anchoring the chaos of a street fair, but I love the different ages, and this is just the melting pot that is New York City. This guy in the blue t-shirt almost looks like he's picking a pocket in his gesture. So I love the open-endedness of what's going on here. Again, the woman holding her hair. I love the wind. It animates a still photo. Then this older gentleman back. Again, we use the color to make some sense of this pairing. I'll bring in here too, I had a wonderful book designer. And so it's quite a traditional book design, but the varying of sizes and placements of the photos through the book give it kind of a nice energy as you go through it. It's not just blank page picture, blank page picture. There's a little energy while keeping it, the picture is big enough and readable enough not to clash and make it difficult to make sense of the individual photographs. Beautiful light down on Vesey Street, down in Wall Street, late afternoon. This street lamp has been moved. The corner has changed since the construction of the World Trade Center. But it was a gorgeous afternoon. And I love how the young man's glance seems to go in the direction of that beautiful arching shadow. Just a moment, a simple New York moment. Back up to Midtown in the jewelry district. I love the gestures of these three men. I'm really attracted to hands and hand gesture. They give, it's something painters have always, if you look at the history of painting, hands are dastardly things to paint, and to paint a hand with a gentle gesture and realistically, I think every artist knows that it's one of the most difficult things to do. And so I love this pair of these people. Every hand in these two photos is really beautiful and interesting. Again, not far away from the previous two pictures. I forced the twinning in this one. There's a building that has a very shiny mirrored window that I've sat and played with. And this guy, with the way he's shouldering through, that's a very, again, we haven't seen it in this past year in the pandemic, but people shoulder through the crowds in New York all the time. He looks so harried. Down to Union Square, I'm keeping with the twins here. I was following the little girls in red coats. it was first thing in the morning and I was just warming up my shutter finger, and boom, the other direction, two other twins come holding matching salad bowls or their breakfast. I don't know, but those are the moments that you just, they're gifts, and you're lucky if you're there to catch it.
Melissa,
There's no, yes.
How much interaction do you have with the folks on the street when you're shooting?
Really none. I'm quick, I'm fast, I'm usually on the move. There's only a couple pictures in this book, maybe one, I'll show it, where someone has noticed me. I don't interact. If someone stopped me and say, "Did you just take my picture?" I will definitely stop. And I say, "Well, yes, you know, you look so great. I love your coat. You know, I love the way, you know, the light was falling on your hair." I mean, I'm generally honest about why I took their picture. And generally, it's always a compliment. It's something that appealed to me, that attracted me about the situation or the person. And people are flattered. On a rare occasion, I've had people say, "I didn't want you to take my picture." And I said, "I'll happily delete it, because the picture I don't want the picture anymore." I'm really, I find people in the city and people in general so wonderful and interesting and beautiful in all their variety. So I think that comes through in my body language and in my manner. And if they ask me, I'm very honest. And that diffuses 99 out of 100 situations. But I'm rarely noticed. I'm short. I dress in black. I look like I leave my camera hanging. I look like a tourist. People aren't threatened by me. And generally, I'm quick enough. Generally, I'm not noticed. So thank you. It's a good question. Families, you'll see, I think you've seen already, I'm interested in families and siblings and their interactions. And this again was very close to my apartment after lunch one day. And this is one of those pictures that you take it, but when you take the picture, you don't notice everything that's going on in the scene until you can examine the picture more closely. And both, you know, the brother and sister are scratching, and I don't know if their apples are making them itchy. And there's the family resemblance, and there's the woman off to the right with the red bag as this kind of strange body language. And this is what we're out. This is why I'll walk 10 miles a day. When things come, and things don't usually come together like this, but oh, is it a delight when they do.
Carl asks, when you leave your camera hanging, are you shooting from the hip?
No, I leave the back of my, I shoot digitally. I leave the back of my camera off. I'm quick to the eye. I don't shoot from the hip. I've had no luck doing that. I'm quick. I always use with the same, almost always use a 35 millimeter focal length, sometimes 28 if it's a crowd or a parade or something where I know that I really am going to need to be closer to people to catch everything. But I know exactly where when I do this, I know exactly, in my muscle memory, even for the height and scale of my camera is really quick. So no, I don't shoot from the hip. I can't go through that many failed photographs. There's enough as there is, as many of you probably know. So I had a reviewer suggest that my men perhaps did not fare as well in the book as my women. And, this guy, he's sad. He's a sad birthday boy, but that button makes the shot. There's something so incongruous between the birthday boy and his demeanor. And again, to the right, the children, the family, the noogie. Anyone who's had siblings has probably can relate to that. And I love in that photo of the children, how the framing, the woman is pushing her glasses up and the father's hand is down in the corner. And there's a lot of interest in what's going on with people's hands. Clearly that's a trigger for me, is what's going on with what people are holding or pointing at or gesturing towards. Again, back to my favorite corner at 5th and 42nd, that is no longer my favorite. This woman is parting the crowd. She looks like she could be on the prow of a proud ship. And I'm obviously very attracted to women with strength and confidence. And I think she just has this in spades, every aspect of her. Back downtown, again, close to my apartment, the Barnes and Noble, the man at the Barnes and Noble store on the left and Chinatown on the right. I'm interested in layers and reflections. And I think that we paired these because there's a nice feeling again of this introspection, this little bit of, you know, what's behind and what's in front. Layering of a photo has always been interesting to me. And the man at the bookstore has a big Band-Aid across his nose. You maybe can't see it on the screen, but sometimes it's those little details that are just the little thing that you need to elevate a picture to be more interesting than it otherwise might be. You know, it begs the question, what, you know, did his cat scratch him? Did he get in a fight? Has he had a nose? You know, there's so many. I like when our imaginations are let into a picture a little bit. Again, beautiful light against a wall is always a place to stop and look. She was dancing with her hula hoop. And again, she has this beautiful kind of inward expression with her earphones in. And, you know, I liked, in the book, we needed to stop and give a little quiet at points in the book. And I think she's a wonderful example. This is a funny story Joel Meyerowitz had agreed to write the introduction, and we sent him our first draft, and I had shown him work before. I had sent him a book dummy, you know, early before I started to work with Aperture. And Joel wrote back and he said, "Where's the food cart?" So it hadn't been in our first go around. So back in the food cart went. Again, it's you know, sequencing a book, you know, we didn't think it fit at certain points and we shifted a few things around, but it's a very New York winter moment with the light streaming down Fifth Avenue and the food carts that have been there, you know, from the 50s and 60s in classic, you know, street photography of New York City. So it was kind of a nice way to bring history in and beautiful light. And again, you'll notice it's that woman's, I took several photos, but it was the girl with her hand raised that gives you that anchor of a gesture in the middle of this kind of beautiful, colorful, chaotic scene that can make the picture. It's that little thing. Here's the woman who spied me. She doesn't mind. So obviously I've approached her in a way, you know, we've made eye contact. She's noticed me, but it's a little moment of collusion and pleasure, I think. And we had to put her and her fake furs with the man on the right and the hanged dog, and every street photography book should have a dog. And so he's one of mine, looking sad about the message on the man's coat. Wonderful, again, strong, you know, beautifully put together woman, who with just an amazing expression. I think she spotted me too.
Carl asks, when you have two photos facing each other, how do you choose which is the larger versus which is the smaller?
Oh, that's like this one? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Because as we were sequencing the book, my editor said to me, we can't always put what we think is the better picture as the bigger picture. She said, people get onto your game. And so there's no value judgment as to which is bigger and which is smaller. I haven't actually put the book, you know, every page from the book here, but if you go through the book, there's some rhyme or reason. You know, we didn't put too many of the big small together. We kind of wanted to pace the book with some energy. So sometimes things went big and small, and sometimes with this one, we spread onto 2 pages just to keep an energy, kind of an energy running through the book, through the dimensions of the pictures and in the layout. So it really was a really kind of a subjective, now do we do this? It's time for a pair, and should this one be big and small? And we can't always make the better picture the bigger picture. It was just really, it really evolved slowly. So there's no one answer for that. Just the last few spreads of the book, I'm watching my time because I've got a little more new work to show. this again, a twist on the typical tale of the men. You know, was it Ruth Orkin's famous photo of the men ogling the woman? Not every sailor here is a man. I think there's one woman in the group. But I love the, you know, I love the twist on the tale of the woman checking out the sailors. So it was another way for me to kind of state my womanhood in this book, and maybe give a little twist on what has been a more male gaze in street photography. Being a mother with 2 daughters, I'm very attracted to mothers and daughters, and how the mothers age and how they interact with each other, and how sometimes they have exactly the same gesture when they look at books. Genes are amazing things. And photos reveal this in subtle ways. You don't catch those little things unless you're a child and stop to stare, you know, impolitely. The camera records things that you wouldn't otherwise see, and they're often really beautiful and telling and delightful. Again, I'm still twinning with mothers and daughters and crowds and trying to make chaos. I was following the girls in the Levi's jackets, forcing twins just by, as Joel said in the essay, the shout of branding. And the other family came in the other direction. This is just, I was following and shooting and following and shooting, and then this other group came along, and that's when you get it. I mean, it wouldn't have been, you know, the picture of the 3 backs of the mother and daughters would never have made, you know, a truly interesting photo. It was the chaos that Fifth Avenue used to serve up to us that made it interesting. And towards the end, you know, we went to a couple quiet, really tender photos, because that's an important aspect of life being lived on the streets of New York as well. I love the couple of girls on the right, and that woman has her crucifix on backwards, and there's a little scar on her neck if you look closely, and it just feels the skin is beautiful and the light is beautiful, and people are beautiful. There's tenderness to be found too in the chaos. And my editor joked this picture, which is the third to the last in the book. She said, we're out of here, you know, kind of, we're leaving this book and we're getting a taxi and we're out of here. But again, the woman is the stronger protagonist here, I think. I mean, they're an amazing couple, amazingly dressed. The gestures are so full of energy and hope for that taxi. This might have been pre-Uber, though I don't know. And I closed the book with, you know, another older woman. Typically, I don't like to do backs of people too much, but the little bit of the arch of her elderly back and the way that her hair, the steam echoed her hair. She was talking to a friend and I was down low, and I would have stolen that wonderful coat off her back with all the women on the faces of girls on it. So again, she felt like a good bookend to my woman in the floral hat at the beginning. So that's the last picture in the book. So that's Perfect Strangers.
So that's your only book, right? Your first book?
This is my first book, my only book.
Do you have any advice for other people who are looking to do their first book? Is there anything, I know you talked like you learned a lot from the process, but is there kind of one overarching piece of advice you might have?
Seek out the opinions and input of other artists, photographers that you really respect as you're starting to put work together. This sequence, this book was like constantly shifting over the course of us putting it together. So, but I was in such good hands with Aperture and with Denise, and I had strong feelings about the things I wanted the book to say, and Denise had ideas, and my mother came to some of our meetings, and the humor and tenderness was really important to her. And so don't get too many opinions, but do solicit opinions of photographers or artists or people that you really trust their eye and their advice. I think that's the best place to start, and start printing your work and making dummies and showing it to people. And that's the best place to start.
Ken, you had a question? just have to
Sorry, I had
unmute.
to unmute myself. Melissa, your work is just phenomenal, and
Oh, thank you.
congratulations on this this book. It's just fantastic. I just wanted to make a comment. I'm so happy you mentioned the Ruth Orkin image, because when you showed, I think it was your third image at the beginning of the woman in Chinatown opening the door, that Ruth Orkin image is immediately what came to mind for me, because this is like 180 degrees different in time of attitudes towards women and women towards men between those two images. Here she's opening the door for the man. No men are ogling her. The composition is completely different, of course, and it's not black and white, but it's just, it's like it's a refreshing update of that Ruth Orkin image, and I just think it's wonderful. So.
Thank you. That's really nice to hear, because I really wanted to communicate that through the book. I don't always want to be just known as a female street photographer. I'm a street photographer any more than men want to be like, well, I'm a male street photographer. You want your work to be of the moment and of your vision. So obviously I'm attracted to maybe turning the tables a little bit, and strong women, and times have changed. Yes. So all of that is, I think, is valid. And I hope that some of that comes through in the book. So thank you. That's a great point.
And we have a couple more questions about the book before we move on to your other project. How long did it take you to finish the book? And the second part of that question is, how did you go about finding someone to help you sequence?
The book took from, soup to nuts, from contract to printed book, about a year. I had the contract before we actually started working on the book, and Aperture had a schedule that they wanted to adhere to. As I said, I was afraid they might not, it just, the pandemic slammed into the middle of this project, but, it was a little delayed, but not much. What was the second part of the question?
How did you go about finding someone to help you sequence the book?
Well, Aperture, because because Aperture approached me and wanted to do a book together, they offer an editor. So the commissioning editor was Denise Wolfe, and we, from the very start, we worked together. I had a book dummy that I showed them, but the book ended up to be different than what I had initially put together. So it was the two of us really, in tandem, coming up with ideas and shifting things around. But it was Denise Wolfe at Aperture who was the editor and was the person I worked with to come up with the final. She suggested some designers, and so it was very much in tandem with Aperture and with Denise. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, well, now I'm going to show new work that I'm not sure of. I have put it together because this is all work I've done during the pandemic. I did everything that's maybe a no-no. It's black and white and color. It's the city and the suburbs, but it's very much about, I tried to put together a little bit of a story about my feelings, my experience, my walks during the time of pandemic. So there are no crowds. There are some individual people. There's some black and white. It's a completely different body of work than this book that I've shown. And I'm not going to maybe say too much about the pictures. I call it something of the marvelous, because I was struggling with how could I possibly put this pandemic work together. And I was walking on Lafayette Street in New York City, and someone had plastered this quote on the side of a boarded up building. And it said, "In all things of nature, there is something of the marvelous." And I had been taking pictures in nature. And I thought, how do I work in kind of some of the darker work that I'm doing and the black and white? And I thought, well, maybe nature will be the marvelous part for me of the pandemic, because I did spend a lot more time walking in the woods and walking alone when I was out in the suburbs. And it was very, nature is very sustaining and very healing, and it was to me. So when I saw this quote, I'm not sure any of this is all, I'm just throwing this out there for everybody. Please comment as I go if you think it's not holding together, or there's something you like, or something you're interested in. I'm so eager to hear, because this is just, here's what I've been working on. But there's a little tongue in cheek, of course, because it's pandemic work and so much of it was not marvelous. And I think that maybe comes through in the work too. So I'm going to go through this a little quickly, but again, stop me at any time. I'm happy to stop and answer questions. So in my town, there's someone very officious in town hall, and there were arrows on X's on benches and arrows telling you have to walk this way on this path and this way on this path. And I mean, we see that everywhere. And so I open with this, what's going to happen? Which way do we go? How are we going to deal with this pandemic? I took this very early in the days of the first lockdown in March. And when everything was so frightening in New York City, I was out in the suburbs, but missing being in the city because it was terrifying, but it's a place that I love. So this kind of brings you into my fear and confusion. I bring fences into is a theme that runs through this little body of work. I've kind of laid out like a little zine or a little book. I don't know. I wanted to tell you what I've been thinking and how I've been responding to the world. So this is a couple blocks from my house, and fences keep us in and separated from each other at this time. Nature. This is just a wall that had vines that somebody stripped off. But again, I found solace in just line and shape and the marks of nature. Cars, as we know, everyone was home. The cars were all in the driveways. Again, I love the line of the little bricks in front of the old car and the line of the dribbling from a tailpipe, I think. But again, I was just, trying to respond to the little things that I would see on a walk when there were no people out. I wanted to try to make something of what I was seeing and feeling. And, last spring up into the sky, there's kind of a darkness to the trees, but a joy in the forsythia. And I'm loose. I'm trying to bring nature, here I brought some color into what is feeling more somber. And is there hope there? Into the city, this man, on a corner, the ominous shadows. It's a really simple photo on 7th Avenue. He's got a little lollipop in his mouth and his mask hanging down. And it's just about the body language and the gesture. We all needed help. This is just a sign on the sidewalk in New York City. Nature, but maybe a call for help. Masks, gloves, sorrow. This is just the door to my apartment, feeling locked in. This is how we have to exit the building. Nature cares not for our isolation, bursting into spring green. Again, shrouds and parked cars. I felt it. It's a simple photo, but I felt it. We all went out and did a little more gardening, I think. I don't have a picture of sourdough bread, but my daughter-in-law has become an expert. So maybe that would fit. Maybe I'll go over there and fit that into the idea. Went to the cemetery. I don't know if this picture fits, but it's a place I went. It's a light that I responded to. Makes me feel that children can't be out playing. They're home at Zoom school. Motifs of the sun. And generally in this work, when nature comes in, I turn to color. When the city comes in, I turn to black and white. But again, the lesson learned from my editor at Aperture is, don't let people onto your game. So I mixed it up a little bit as I was just putting this all together. kiosk, an advertising kiosk in New York, close to home in the suburbs. The city and the headlines. Yellow was important to me as my color palette. As you notice, there's nothing in here with a blue sky. There's no reds or pink. I tried to keep my color palette uniform. I kind of thinking, you know, I'm thinking I created this on the screen. I haven't printed out the work and started turning the pages. So it's just very early into how I'm thinking about this work. Again, back to the yellow, I have a palette, but it wasn't a blue sky day. World feels shattered. Fences. The somber city. This was 42nd Street last summer when everything was being boarded up because of the protests and the great unrest and sadness of the George Floyd murder. And I love that she's just very gently dragging her hand. Again, I'm drawn to hands, dragging. She's alone on this formerly busy street and she's just gently dragging her hand across the plywood. It's those little gestures that interest me. I walk very early in the morning light is lovely. And again, fences, houses, the feeling of people being cooped up and locked in. This was just a road near home. I was out on a walk and they had salted the road and I just thought it was somber and beautiful and thoughtful. Fall in the city. It's my only crowd picture and it's just, to me, it's when we were let out, Washington Square Park just overflowed with people when we felt last summer that we could be out a bit and get some fresh air and see friends and be safe if we were outside. So there's joy to be found. And, you know, this fall, one of the arrows was gone. So maybe there's a feeling that there's some way out of this, some direction home. Spring, last spring. And that's it.
Melissa, I really have a comment. I really like the work quite a bit, this new work. And one of the things I loved most about it was the beginning, how you had those series of black and white images that were so kind of moody and dangerous. And then that shock of the yellow flower image. And like you set a mood and then you disrupted it. I thought that was very powerful. And I just have one little suggestion possibly for, there's kind of a middle section after this where it's like a lot of color pictures back to back. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if that section could maybe use a little bit more of the danger, like maybe one of a different black and white, you know, danger picture in between all that color.
Yeah, good suggestion. I've shifted this around, you know, so many ways. As I said, I haven't printed it out yet. And I think that's an essential part of starting to think about a body of work together. So as I said, it's in its early stages, and you're absolutely right. As you flip through it, I kind of lose this thread of something a little ominous. So it's a work in progress, and it may never come to any more than this sort of thing, but I will print it out and play with it, or maybe make a zine or something like that. So those are great. I'm interested to hear if anyone else has any thoughts or feelings about making this kind of work that's so different than what I had been doing on the streets of New York. No?
Melissa.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I just think that, you know, your book is so much about humanity and the things you're observing this work seems a lot more personal and introspective, and I find that intriguing, and I enjoyed it very much. So for what it's worth.
Thank you.
But it seems more personal.
It's far more personal, and it, as we all know, we couldn't be out working in the way, you know, I didn't do a lot around the house. I had done that in the past, and I just, you know, that didn't happen. But I think we, you know, I wanted to be taking pictures. I wasn't terribly productive, truth be told. I think in the beginning we were all just in such a state of shock and what is, you know, fear. We didn't know what we could do and what we couldn't do with any safety. But I think a lot of us had, I know I didn't, I had strange dreams at the beginning of the pandemic. And we all, it was, I think it was so unsettling and stressful, and for people's mental health. So the camera helped me. At least I was able to get out every morning for a morning walk and respond to the world in some way. And it just, I didn't know if anything, you know, I still don't know if all this is going to hang together, but it's work that I was making coming from a very personal place and working in a very different way. So, yeah.
And it shows.
Thank you. Well, if we have a couple more minutes, I'll show very quickly one more thing I've been working on with a friend. I have a friend who's an actor and a really wonderful photographer by the name of Dan Ziske. And we met on a street corner in New York and got to be friends over the years. And so during the pandemic, we've been putting our work together in kind of a series of zines. None have been printed yet. They're still being, they're kind of in the InDesign stage. But we had a lot of fun doing it. And it was really fun just to work with a friend and go through our archives and play and find similarities in our work and themes in our work, mostly in New York, that we could just put together. We'll print these up. We might print, you know, 75 copies or 60 copies. And it's fun. And he's a wonderful photographer. And we had a lot of fun putting it together. So this is one of the ones we put together. Again, his name is Dan Ziske. You can find him at just that name on Instagram. He's really a great photographer, and that he's an actor shows in his work. He catches people in really cinematic moments and in wonderful expressions and feeling in his photographs. So this is just a very quick run through of a few pages of this zine that we put together of people just completely lost in the city. And it's something we found out just by going through our archives together, that we're both, you know, attracted to people being lost and pointing and trying to navigate their way through the city. So it's a little funny, it's fun, it's got a lot of really great New York moments. It makes us realize how much we miss tourists, lost tourists in the city, because they're well represented in this little grouping of pictures. But again, you'll notice maybe some of the corners that you saw in my other book are here, but it's just kind of, it's people not knowing which way to go in the city. And we thought it was kind of a fun exercise to put these together. And we're both kind of perfectionists, so we tried to design it very carefully. And we found a pretty good printer who can do a pretty good quality publication for not, you know, paperback little book for not too much money. But we've done 3 so far. We're working maybe on a 4th. I don't know what it'll come to or how many we'll print, but we've really had fun. It was fun to work with a friend on a project. Again, we had the time at home to go through our archives. So this is kind of what we turned up. So yeah.
So we have 5 more minutes. If anyone else has some questions, feel free to speak up and ask them.
So that's it. Nobody? Well, I'm happy to just say my thank yous then. I really appreciate everyone taking the time and giving me their attention and being here on the screen, even if we can't do it in person. So I'm sorry I can't meet every one of you in person. That's something that we're all bereft of these days with Zoom, but next time. So thank you so much. And thank you, Julia and the whole team for having me. I'm really honored to be here. It was good fun.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you. Thank you. Thank you.